Before we start, I'd like to point out that I am not a doctor. I'm just someone who suffers from the disease, and everything I know about it, I know either from my own experience or from the hive mind of the self-help groups on Facebook, or other people that suffer from myasthenia gravis, or what my doctor has explained to me. So this is all information that I either read up myself or gathered on the internet by, listening to other people, etc. So I might be wrong on a couple of things. I might get some of the facts wrong, even though I try very hard to keep them straight. But especially since myasthenia isn't very, very well researched, or this is very well researched. They're working on it, but there's still a lot of research to be done, and treatment plans and symptoms. The official list of symptoms, they change constantly. The treatments get adjusted, so it's still, just pointing that out. So the information I'm giving you is always up for debate, of course. Not everyone has the same experience, especially because myasthenia is a very individual disease. Not everyone has the same symptoms, not everyone has the same body parts affected, and all that sort of thing. So just like to point that out here. So yes, let's continue the terrible tale of how I was diagnosed with myasthenia gravis. So I'd just like to talk about the first symptoms which I had. And since myasthenia is so terribly rare, it's very hard to diagnose. It's very hard for neurologists to find it. So I'm thinking the more people are aware of the most common symptoms and the first symptoms that usually show up with myasthenia gravis, the easier it will be to be diagnosed, or at least, to recognize them in yourself if you find them. You find you have any of these symptoms, and maybe even point out to a neurologist, that you think that's what it might be. The first myasthenia related issues I found were that my left eye started drooping one day, just out of nowhere. I'm going to see if I can find some old selfies which I took to document this, and put them somewhere so you can see what that looked like. So anyway, I wasn't thinking too much of it. I was just like, I just started aging a lot, really fast at the age of 28. I'm like, okay, this is all downhill. Finally, my awful lifestyle of eating only shite and never exercising and drinking too much and smoking has caught up with me. I am going to start aging terribly now. Time to start looking after myself. So that's what was my initial thought. So let's say that went on for a week or so. I'm not great with timelines, mainly also because I wasn't paying too much attention. I just saw it happened. So, you don't really document what's happening to yourself if you don't think it's important. So yeah, the first thing I realized was the droopy eyelid, and the second thing that happened quite quickly after that was that I started having double vision. So the double vision is very common for people suffering from ocular myasthenia, which is basically, since the myasthenia is affecting the muscles in your eye, is that one of the eyes can't keep up with the other one, so you can't focus on things anymore. The result is you start having, instead of both eyes looking at one thing, you have one picture, you start having the picture as a double. Since both eyes are making, as they do, they take a picture, and since they're not looking at the same thing anymore, you basically go cross-eyed. You can't always see it, but you can see it with me if it starts. The pictures start drifting apart, and then you have double vision. Literally, it is exactly what it sounds like. So for me, that started for a couple of hours, started with a couple of hours a day mainly when I was tired and I was working, so I went home. First time I noticed double vision was when I got home from work and I sat down at my laptop and I wanted to read something or other, and I noticed that the lines of the writing started blending into each other and just started being double. And when I closed one eye, it disappeared. I could read again. But if I opened both eyes, the lines would always blur into each other. Same thing as when I looked at something, just, if it was a bit further away, there were just always two pictures. Now, that is how it started. It was a couple of hours a day in the evening. So I thought, as you do, I'm just going to wait for a little bit and then maybe, I just thought it wasn't recording, and then maybe it'll just disappear by itself. You're tired, your work is stupid, hate your job, so maybe you're just, you've been looking at a screen for too long. So it didn't disappear after a couple of days, so I went to an ophthalmologist, I think that's how you say that. Anyway, I went to an eye doctor and had it checked out, and she immediately transferred me to a neurologist. It's very hard to get a neurologist appointment where I live because there's not a lot of neurologists around. It's just it's just not enough to go around. So she was kind enough to write me a referral, and she put the words, I think she put important or very urgent on it, and that led to me having an appointment with the doctor the same day. I went to the doctor. He was a nice enough guy, I guess, and he didn't even, he said, well, double vision could be multiple things. Let's not worry too much. I'm going to take blood, and then we check the blood level, and I'm going to order a head MRT to see if there's anything wrong with your head. So he didn't tell me how long it would take for the blood levels to come back. Turns out it takes a while. So I'm freaking out, obviously. You can always imagine everything that happens from here with me being absolutely freaked out and be in an absolute state of panic. I'm just all over the place, buzzing around, shaking uncontrollably, all that stuff. It wasn't very pleasant. So I try to get an appointment at a different doctors which do the MRTs, the brain scan, and that was, I think it was 3 or 4 weeks from the point which that was ordered. So I had to wait 3 or 4 weeks, let's say 3 weeks for the sake of argument, because I can't remember, to find out if I had a brain tumor, which at that point I'm convinced I have a brain tumor. I go to the head CT scan, but it was too late. I couldn't go back to the doctor. So I was freaking out. I was waiting for 3 weeks to get the head MRT done to check if I had a brain tumor. So I get out of the place that does the pictures, and I take my little DVD, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to go to the doctor immediately, and I have him check it out immediately, and he's going to tell me if there's something wrong with it. Turns out he doesn't work very long in the afternoon. They only work until like 4 p.m. and it was 4:05 or something, like ridiculously close to them closing down. They just had closed down, so I had to go home with my MRT pictures of my head. I actually tried to figure out if I had a brain tumor myself. It turns out you can look at them yourself. Don't. There's no point really. I spent the entire night and tried to learn everything about head MRTs. There was about 60 pictures, and how to recognize a brain tumor or meningitis on the internet. There's a lot of great resources on that. Doctors learn a lot on YouTube, it turns out. I tried to learn it as well. I failed. I saw like this little white line, and I thought it was a sign for an infected, the brain membrane. It wasn't. It just wasn't. But anyway, I was convinced I was dying. Went back with the results to the doctor. He looked at it. It took him about a second to see that there's absolutely nothing wrong with the pictures, which he apparently already knew because he was expecting something else entirely, and then he ordered a MRT of the chest region, which took another 3 weeks for me to get an appointment for. So I'm freaking out again. I'm thinking I have a tumor. He said the results of the blood works were back, but he didn't tell me what they said. No one actually told me anything of what they said. He just said he thought that with the results which he had gotten, it could be a specific type of disease. Didn't tell me what it was. I asked, he was just like, yeah, the antibodies, there's increased antibody activity, and that would mean that I could have a certain autoimmune disease. Didn't tell me what it was. So I asked for the results of my blood work and took them home with me and Googled the bitch. I just Googled them myself, because that's how you find out what you've got. That's how it works. If people won't tell you what you have, you just Google it yourself. Googled it, figured it out, found Myasthenia Gravis, found out what he was doing the chest MRT. It's because myasthenia often goes hand in hand with a tumor of the thymus gland. He just said I could have a tumor. I'm so sure I'm having a tumor because, I'm dying. I was sure I was dying. I got the MRT for the chest. And that time, all this time of waiting and waiting for results and waiting for doctor's appointment, the symptoms of my myasthenia had gotten ridiculously worse. It had already spread to not even being a couple of hours a day of having a droopy eyelid and having double vision to constant double vision. Like within the first couple of weeks, I just had constant double vision. I couldn't see anymore, I couldn't drive anymore. It then spread very fast within these 6 to 8 weeks of waiting for results and waiting for finding out things that had spread to my limbs. I couldn't walk upstairs anymore. I couldn't do a lot of things anymore. I couldn't do the work with my horses, which I usually did, cleaning up the paddocks and stuff. I couldn't do it anymore. Additionally to that, I had a racing pulse constantly. I had heart arrhythmia, which basically almost killed me every time I tried to physically do anything. I couldn't walk my dog longer than 10 minutes 3 times a day anymore. It had affected my balance. I couldn't really walk anymore. Never mind. So it had spread extremely. I tried to get follow-up appointments with the neurologist, couldn't get through to him. I was standing there, crying more than once. 3-4 times I was just standing at his office on the front desk, crying my eyes out, hoping to get an appointment with him. I had my friend drive me there. I couldn't walk up the stairs anymore. I had to take the elevator into the first floor, all that sort of stuff. So it was getting worse fast. So by that time I already started having extremely obsessive thoughts. I was sitting at home going insane. My thoughts were racing. I was going through manic depressive episodes within hours. I was just sitting there crying, my eyes out, not being able to do anything anymore, not being able to go out. The only thing I did was walk the dog. That's all I was capable of doing. I was going crazy. So I started looking for a psychologist. So I was sitting at the psychologist, which I was about to see for the second time, so not very often, but my phone rings, and it was one of the ladies at the neurologist's office. She calls me and tells me that yes, I do have a tumor in my chest and that needs to be operated out, and she would give me a phone number of the nearest hospital which would be able to do it, and I needed to make my own appointment. No information was given to me at that point about the tumor, what the tumor had to do with my disease, which disease it was, what the antibodies meant. I had absolutely no information. The doctor had absolutely no information except for what I gave to his office workers, that I was getting worse, but you apparently didn't give a shit anyway. And then she calls me to tell me that I have a tumor which had to be removed. That was basically the last straw. I was sitting at the psychologist's office, which was just, happy coincidence. So anyway, all the information I had from the internet, which I googled myself. I googled the blood results, which led me to myasthenia gravis. At that point, I was sure, without anyone confirming it, that I had myasthenia gravis, and I was actually correct because of the tumor and the blood work. Luckily, it made it very clear that I had myasthenia. I had all the antibodies, which can only be related to myasthenia, show up positive, which made it very easy to diagnose for me. And I had all the symptoms which are most common for myasthenia, for diagnosing myasthenia, which is very lucky. Most people are not that lucky. They have different symptoms show up first, and it takes years for them to be diagnosed, and years for them to get help. It did not take years for me to get help because, I'd started looking up everything by myself. It literally took a couple of months to be diagnosed. So yeah, from the first symptoms to being diagnosed, which was actually never done properly. He just said I had to go, he never diagnosed me. I never saw him. Again, after the first initial meeting, he never explained to me what I had. He basically just wrote a letter to the hospital which I was to go to, and in the letter I read what I had finally, what he thought I had and what had to be done about it. The letter only contained the initial symptoms which I showed up with, which was the double vision and the droopy eyelid. It didn't contain anything of the things that developed in the time which I waited for the results. So, let's just say I'm still very upset about the entire situation and how it worked out. And so is my family and my friends and everyone I talk about it. I guess I should be thankful that he diagnosed it so quickly, even though he was very, very unhelpful after that. So anyway, that's the story about how I was diagnosed, about my first symptoms, how I was diagnosed with myasthenia. The next video is going to be how, from this diagnosis, I did not go to the hospital which he referred me to, but how I actually went directly into the emergency department of one of the myasthenia centers, university clinics in Hamburg. So yeah, I'm just trying to space these logically, because obviously I'm trying to work through them in my mind as I talk about them. And you know how memory is. It's not necessarily linear or necessarily the way which it actually happens. Sometimes I just realize things while I talk about them. So I'm very sorry if it's confusing. Yeah. If you have any questions or any comments, just drop me a line. I'm on Twitter, Instagram. Yeah, if you're interested, I'm gonna try and upload weekly or bi-weekly. So far it's not going very well because I can't really sort out my thoughts properly, but I'm gonna try very hard to do exactly that. So anyway, I hope you have a lovely day and talk to you soon, hopefully.